A rubber ball thuds against a cold stone wall. The sound echoes through the canyon of the core. Suddenly, the drummer's beat cuts out. The music stops. Hundreds of people packed onto the stone terraces hold their breath in total, suffocating silence. Everyone knows what is at stake. The next bounce won't just decide the winner, it will decide who lives and who does not. To a modern viewer, this looks like madness. It's just a game, right? Just a piece of rubber, a couple of teams, and some rules. But if you look closer at history, games with a ball have never been just games. They have always carried a second, hidden, and far more dangerous job: organizing human power and tidying up social chaos and deciding whose emotions can be turned like a dial on command. Long before global stadiums, flashing jumbotrons, and billion-dollar sponsor contracts, a simple ball game was drawn right into the very architecture of human belief. Let's travel back centuries ago to Mesoamerica. Imagine an eye-shaped court baked under a brutal, unforgiving sun. The walls are high, made of heavy stone, and decorated with intricate, terrifying carvings. The ball itself is a marvel of ancient engineering. It's not the light, air-filled leather sphere we know today. This ball is made of solid latex. It is heavy, dense, and dangerous. If it hits you in the chest or the face at full speed, it can crush your bones or kill you on the spot. It bites back. And here is the twist. According to the rules, players are forbidden from touching the ball with their hands or feet. Imagine the physical strain. To keep this deadly piece of rubber in the air, players have to launch their bodies onto the hard stone floor, twisting their hips, using their shoulders, and striking the ball with their pelvis. It's not just athletics, it's a violent bruising dance where fate is ricocheted back and forth. Under the rising rule of the Aztec Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries, this game slid from a sport into something much darker. It became a literal ritual. If you visit the ruins of these courts today, you will see carvings that make your blood run cold. Depictions of severed heads, kneeling warriors, and priests performing heart extractions right on the playing field. The game was a literal conversation with the gods. The movement of the ball symbolized the movement of the sun and the stars. If your team lost, it meant the cosmos was out of balance, and the only way to fix that balance, blood. Now, modern scholars argue a lot about the details. Not every single match ended in a horrific human sacrifice. Sometimes it was just a sport, sometimes it was used to settle territorial disputes between tribes without going to full-scale war. But the crucial point is this: the possibility of ultimate sacrifice, death tied to the bounce of a ball, was not a metaphor. It was state policy. It was a calculated tool used by the ruling elite to show the masses who held the power over life and death. The message was clear: obey, watch the court, and remember that your life depends on the rules we created. Cross the ocean, leave the sun-baked stone structures behind, and drop yourself into a muddy, chaotic English field in the year 1314. The air is cold, smelling of wood smoke and wet earth. London's mayor steps forward to post a heavy written proclamation. In Norman French, he isn't talking about religion or the cosmos. He is furious, and he is issuing a warning about something happening right now in the city streets. The document complained bitterly about a great racket in the city, a wild hustling over large footballs, and fights that flare up like brush fire in public lands. With a stroke of a pen, the mayor forbids the game on pain of immediate imprisonment. Think about that. Not because the ball itself is evil, not because it represents a pagan devil, but because the game completely, instantly rearranges the entire city. When a match begins, shopkeepers bolt their heavy wooden doors. Apprentices vanish from their workshops into the roiling crowds. Lines between local parishes blur, and the lines of established authority blur even faster. This wasn't the organized sport we watch on weekends. This was mob football. Hundreds of men chasing a leather bladder filled with air, running through markets, breaking fences, and trampling gardens. Mob football moved people in ways that the city official could not predict, track, or control. It created a temporary, chaotic democracy of the streets where a peasant could legally tackle a nobleman into the mud. And whenever a population finds a way to move and act outside the gates of the state, the city answers with the only tool it truly trusts: a total ban. But somewhere between those sacrificial stone courts of the Aztecs and the banned, muddy streets of London, something else was happening. In the shadows of history, children who owned absolutely nothing, who had no property, no legal rights, and no future would look at the ground, gather scraps of rags, tie them tightly into a knot, and invent a ball. A piece of garbage became a toy, and then that toy became a tiny public arena. You see, you don't need a massive stadium to feel that sudden electric snap of belonging. You don't need an anthem, you just need enough people to stand in a circle and agree that the next kick actually matters. Enslaved kids on plantations, peasants in dark medieval lanes, servants working on the cold edges of the town square. For all of them, play made rigid borders flicker and fuse. For 90 minutes, it didn't matter who owned the land or who wore the chains. The ball was the master and the players were equal under its bounds. And that is the exact moment the empires learned a terrifyingly effective lesson. Whenever you find a mechanism that can fuse thousands of desperate different people that quickly, you realize you can use that fuse to power your own machine. The Romans had a phrase for it, a phrase that would echo down through 2,000 years of political strategy. Bread and circuses. The satirist Juvenal groaned in disappointment. He wrote it as if Rome had successfully automated human attention. The strategy was simple. Feed the crowd, fill the calendar with spectacles, and keep the public mood busy. Spectacle did not replace state violence. It timed it, it colored it, it gave it a regular schedule. A ball is simpler than a parliament. It is far easier to love than a tax code. It moves, it reacts, it creates instant drama, and our eyes move with it automatically. Fast forward through centuries of careful tinkering, the wild, bloody street scrums of England are slowly tamed. Rules firm up. The boundaries of the field are drawn with permanent white chalk instead of temporary rumors. Animal bladders give way to vulcanized rubber precision. Goalposts straighten their backs, and local clubs harden into massive corporations with legal departments and global marketing teams. But as the game became a business, something else hardened too. The precise way the game interfaces with your personal identity. Pay attention to what happens to your language when your favorite team wins a match. You don't look at the television and say, those 11 athletes won a game. No. You smile, you beat your chest, and you say, we won. You take the team shirt out of the closet, maybe a shirt you didn't even wear the week before, and it suddenly feels like a heavy suit of armor. You walk through the streets with your head held high, absorbing the victory of strangers, as if it were your own personal achievement. But watch what happens if they lose. The language shifts instantly. You drop the we without even thinking about it. You switch to they. They played terribly. They lost the match. You become a cold, distant weather forecaster of other people's failure, separating your ego from the wreckage on the screen. Psychologists actually studied this phenomenon on university campuses in real time. They counted the number of school sweatshirts and team apparel students wore on Monday mornings. The results were identical across the board. Significantly more school apparel appeared after a football victory, and almost none appeared after a devastating loss. The researchers gave this human behavior a clean academic phrase, basking in reflected glory. But beneath that clean phrase lies a messy, chaotic electrical storm in the human chest. It isn't a fake feeling. The joy you feel when the ball hits the net is completely real. The tears are real. The game acts as a psychological shortcut to answering the most complicated question in human history. Who am I? It gives you an identity with far fewer moving parts, fewer arguments, and less moral heavy lifting than religion, nation, or political party. The ball edits your pronouns. It takes an isolated I and turns it into a powerful collective we. And history shows us that once an instrument can edit your pronouns, it can edit your mind. Zoom the camera into a specific summer. 1978, Buenos Aires, Argentina. A brutal military junta is running the country through systemic terror. People are being pulled from their beds, forced into unmarked cars, and disappeared forever. Secret torture centers are operating day and night, some of them sitting just a short 10-minute drive from the grand football stadiums. And then, the World Cup arrives like a total blinding eclipse. The pitches are manicured like green velvet. The national anthems ring out with manufactured pride. Color television cameras beam a choreographed version of modern Argentina out to the rest of the world, Orderly queues, clean streets, smiling volunteers, and zero signs of resistance. The home team fights its way to the final and lifts the golden trophy into the sky. The stadium erupts into absolute madness. Confetti rains down like snow. And in that exact same moment, blocks away, terrified families are scanning the roaring crowd, looking for the faces of sons and daughters who never came home. It was grotesque. It was heartbreaking. But from a purely structural standpoint, it was devastatingly effective. The military regime understood the deep alchemy of the game. It provided 90 minutes where public rage, passion, and violence were not just allowed but actively encouraged, as long as that rage ran on pre-painted rails of light blue and white. If the public anger threatened to spill over into the streets, the government simply drowned it out with another victory parade. This is the exact point where the tool part of the game becomes completely visible. A tool doesn't invent human feelings out of nothing. It focuses them. It takes a massive, chaotic reservoir of public anxiety, economic fear, and anger, channels it through a tiny choke point, and dictates the exact second of its release. You can almost hear the bureaucratic clicks behind the scenes. National pride dials up, institutional trust flattens out, public scrutiny of the state budget drops to zero, and commercial sales skyrocket. If you're a corporate advertiser, you ride this wave to sell shoes and soda. If you're a government under pressure, you use this wave to schedule your storms, making sure the public vents its anger at a referee rather than a politician. And to be perfectly clear, this isn't a massive cinematic conspiracy with a single evil puppet master sitting in a dark room. It is much bigger than that. It is an entire ecosystem that has developed habits over decades. Politicians drape team scarves over their expensive suits because they know it serves as an instant, unassailable credential of being one of the people. News cycles naturally learn to orbit around the drama of a semifinal. Entire national economies plan their weekends, their production schedules, and their supply chains around the exact moment of kickoff. Your neighborhood bar stocks extra cases of beer. The digital algorithm loads 5 new pre-roll advertisements that whisper the word belong, using the exact color palette of your home team. The ball hovers over the culture, and every single industry with a pulse reaches out to grab a piece of it. But none of this machine works because of marketing budgets. It only works because of what the game physically does to human bodies packed into a crowd. Rituals synchronize us. The singing of a stadium anthem in unison, the simultaneous swirling of thousands of scarves, the collective sharp gasp of 40,000 people right before a penalty kick is taken. These aren't just thoughts. They are biological events. Once your lungs rise and fall in the exact same rhythm as thousands of total strangers standing around you, you are no longer an independent observer. You are plugged into a collective nervous system. In large groups, human beings become exquisitely, dangerously sensitive to the concepts of us and them. We can map those boundaries in a matter of minutes. The scoreboard at the end of the field is only tracking half of the actual contest. The real game plays out in the dark theater of our limbic system, a story starring recognition, hope, humiliation, and redemption. No political speech, no university lecture, and no propaganda film could ever make a country feel that deeply or that fast. What began thousands of years ago as a children's solution, how to create a whole world out of a bundle of discarded rags, turns out to be the ultimate state solution. How to manufacture a unified nation out of a crowd of total strangers. And along that historical journey, one critical element shifted, the distribution of risk. On those ancient stone courts of Mesoamerica, the price of playing the game could be ultimate physical death. In the cramped medieval alleys of London, the price was a night in a cold jail cell or a broken rib. Today, for the vast majority of modern fans sitting in plastic seats or on their living room couches, the personal danger feels much thinner. But the stakes haven't disappeared. We're still offering something up to the court. We're offering up our attention, an attention so dense, so consistent, and so predictable that it can be minted directly into global currency. That is the strange, invisible trade we make. You sit down on a Saturday afternoon for what you tell yourself is just a game, and the moment the whistle blows, you willingly donate 3 distinct kinds of oxygen. First, you give your emotional oxygen. You hand over your internal settings so someone else can strike a match, light it, and keep you burning with anxiety or joy for 2 hours. Second, you give your social oxygen. You breathe in the collective we, forgiving the consumerism, the corporate greed, and the noise just so you can feel connected to the tribe. And finally, you give your political oxygen. You let your attention focus so tightly on a white line on a field that other, far more dangerous fires burning in the world outside the stadium dim and go completely unnoticed for a while. Not every match is engineered for this outcome. Not every government is actively trying to manipulate the score. Sometimes a game is just pure, beautiful human joy that gets uglified by overinterpretation. But history proves that sometimes that very joy is the perfect solvent used to wash away public doubt. One of the main reasons the game is so incredibly effective at this is because it is entirely honest at its surface. Think about the world we live in. It is complicated, full of gray areas, unfair systems, and arguments that never end. But a match offers 90 minutes of perfectly legible rules. It offers a bright ball you can easily track with your eyes and a final score that conclusively settles the disagreement. It is reality television with absolute referees. You aren't being tricked about the action happening on the grass. You are simply being invited to mistake the clarity of the football field for the clarity of the world outside of it. When the midfielder stays on his feet under a brutal tackle, refusing to fall, you taste a genuine virtue. When the striker takes a dive, faking agonizing pain to get a penalty, you taste the vice. Either way, you leave the screen with a powerful story about human character, and the fastest, laziest place for that story to land in your brain is the old tribal map. Our people are like this, their people are like that. Watch what happens in your own head when the television camera cuts away from the field to show a politician sitting in a luxury box. If you already dislike that politician, your brain registers them as a parasite, someone stealing the pure joy of the sport for a photo op. But if you like them, your brain immediately registers them as one of us, a regular person sharing the emotional risk, just a dad with a team scarf. It is the exact same digital picture, but your brain applies a completely different filter. The ball didn't tell you how to feel about the politician. It did something much more subtle. It gave your brain a low friction track to slide down. The line in the sand, the boundary between innocent play and systematic control, is much thinner than it looks. Look at the physical shape of a modern stadium. It is a carefully engineered closed stone ball designed for one specific purpose: to force thousands of strangers to rehearse being one single organism. The tiny repetitive rituals, singing a specific line a second late, twirling a piece of fabric on a collective cue, become the structural duct tape of public identity. Historically, these kinds of highly synchronized rituals belonged exclusively to religious temples and standing armies. Ball games simply borrowed that powerful choreography and smuggled it into our weekend leisure time. That is exactly why authoritarians throughout history have loved a packed grandstand and the camera's slow, patient pan across thousands of waving flags. It looks like absolute legitimacy. And in politics, sometimes looking like legitimacy is enough to become it, simply by being seen by millions of eyes. And yet, despite the billions of dollars, the political strategies, and the corporate algorithms, the ball changes hands. That single fact matters more than anything else. You can code the software, you can buy the stadium, but you cannot program the bounce of the ball. You cannot schedule the exact millisecond a goalkeeper's glove turns a certain nation's triumphant shout into total freezing silence. The very same wildness, randomness, and unpredictability that scared the medieval mayors of London and delights modern corporate advertisers is the exact same quality that keeps the game alive as a sacred space where the script can break at any moment. People don't cheer together simply because a government wants them to. They cheer because a flawed human being did an impossible human thing under immense pressure, and they could feel that pressure in their own bones. The best, richest teams still lose. The wrong national anthem gets loudly booed by the crowd. A small, broke, unfancy local club suddenly becomes the entire spine and pride of a forgotten city. Control keeps trying to tighten its grip on the sport, but the ball keeps slipping away. So how did a slave kid's rag and a banned medieval street scrum grow into a global instrument that moves human moods by the millions? By discovering a truth deeper than any state propaganda, We as human beings are incredibly easy to organize when we desperately want to be organized. If you give us a clear, simple shape to throw our complex feelings into, we will throw them in every single time. The court can be ancient stone, green grass, city asphalt, or a living room carpet. The rules can be carved into stone by ancient priests or typed into computers by Swiss lawyers. If the bounce of the ball invites us to say the word we will pay for that moment in pure, undivided attention. And someone, somewhere, will always learn how to collect it. Maybe the ultimate question we need to ask isn't whether this system is inherently bad. Maybe the question is whether we can actually notice the meter running while we watch. Whether we can deeply love the play on the field and still clearly see the hands that are framing the stadium. Whether we can enjoy the beautiful choir we join at the 79th minute of the match and still have the awareness to ask who picked the hymn we are singing. Picture that ancient stone chord one last time. The drummer holds the pause. The heavy latex ball is suspended high in the air. History waits to see exactly where it lands. We always have waited, even when we swear to ourselves that we are only watching for the goal.